idea that
So Ryan Grimm
was so absolutely 100% certain that they knew precisely what the right parliamentary tactic was to advance Medicare for all, that anybody who disagreed with them over that was therefore a sellout, and that just drove me crazy. And so I'd be happy to, maybe we could take them one at a time. Maybe whether or not it was the right move at the time, or we could take the other one, whether or not anybody who disagreed with it should properly be called, whatever name.
This is Ryan Grimm and Ryan Knight.
I mean, I'll jump in. I would just start off and say, for
talking
me,
about
when you
stuff.
talk about sellouts, the only sellouts for me are both of these corporate parties who continue to sell out the American people to their corporate donors. And I think why this was such a hot-button issue for
Ryan Knight.
I actually supported AOC's campaign. I remember when AOC had 8,000 followers, and her campaign sent me a private message asking if I would promote her campaign and share her campaign video. And of course, I gladly agreed. I was kind of that's when I started to become more progressive myself. And so, for me, what happened, here's what I see. First of all, I'll just say this. I don't think the main problem in the United States is AOC or any single member of Congress for that matter. The main problem is our decrepit capitalist and imperialist system that both corporate parties preserve and protect, despite the harm that it inflicts, not just in this country, but worldwide. But with that said, AOC and the squad were sent to Congress to fight back against the system and not defend it like the corporates do. So for me, force the vote became an issue. It was almost like a battle for the soul of the Democratic Party, right? We know that the Democratic establishment and the Nancy Pelosi's of the world and the Joe Bidens of the world and the Kristen Sinema's of the world, we know who they represent. They represent the capitalist class and big business. And they go to the mat for the class that they represent. And I think with Force the Vote, it was about asking finally the squad and the progressives, who a lot of people worked really hard to put in Congress, to go to the mat for the poor and the working class, the same way that the establishment does. And that's what I saw. And for me, it was just, there was a complete rejection to the strategy. And what you said, Ryan, is about the whole parliamentary game. For me, it's like the parliamentary game, Nancy Pelosi has that on lockdown. You're never going to beat the Democratic establishment if you're trying to play these kind of parliamentary games, because the Democratic establishment is owned by Wall Street and the giant corporations, and we know who they work for. The only way to beat them is for progressives to actually use their seats as movement leaders and to summon the grassroots that got them elected, and to use them to pressure the corrupt establishment to take action and to have a vote on Medicare for all during the middle of a pandemic. And so it was for me, the warning sign for me was the resistance to it. It was like, how dare people organize and demand these progressives actually fight for the policies they campaigned on. And then organizations like DSA were putting their fingers up and their hands up and saying, how dare you guys? And it's like, actually, this was your strategy. It was in your handbook. And so for me, it's about power, and it's about the fact that, we have to hold these politicians accountable, especially when there's this much injustice and inequality in this country. And a party that calls itself the party of healthcare, controls the entire government, and we can't even get a full vote on Medicare for all from the party that calls itself the party of healthcare. And the last thing I'll say is, they're not the party of healthcare. They're the party of for-profit, predatory health insurance. The ACA is not a universal healthcare system. It was written by corporate lobbyists, and it left 27 million people uninsured and a whole lot more underinsured. And so I think for me, Force the Vote was about, we fought to get them elected, and it's like, why should we keep fighting for them if they're not going to go in there and fight for us? And so for me, it was actually indicative of, is this even possible? Can you even change the Democratic Party from within? That people like AOC and the squad won't even use their seats to fight back against the establishment. And I know that we'll get to that later, but for me, it was like, no, you can't change the party from within, because I feel like the party's already changing AOC and the squad to kind of obey the order of the party, and that's not how you win victories for working people, by playing patty cake with the corrupt establishment.
No, I get that, and I understand how visceral that moment was, that it felt like there was a lot of energy around it. Tens of thousands of people participating in a town hall. They're getting it trending on Twitter. It felt online like there was real momentum that should have been harnessed to kind of push in that direction. To me, the whole thing felt like a agree with you. You're not going to beat Nancy Pelosi at the parliamentary game, and that's what that felt like to me. Like this, we're gonna trick her into like putting it onto the floor, and boom, boom, boom. Good things are going to result from that. So, well, Nancy Pelosi, like you said, she controls these parliamentary maneuvers. She's gonna outfox you in all of these, and here are these different reasons why I don't think that this particular maneuver is a decent one. And at the time, I was critical of progressives in Congress for not giving people something to do with that energy. Like, okay, you don't think that putting this on the floor, or fighting to put this bill on the floor because it's going to lose and because of all these other arguments, is a good idea. So then, what can people do right now? Because for the past year plus, people knew what to do when they were angry. They would donate to Bernie. They would phone bank for Bernie. They had something that they could organize around. There were candidates, local candidates running in their town or in their state that they could get behind, who were fighting for things they really believed in. And they did not show that leadership at that time. And so into that vacuum came Force the Vote. And so I don't blame Force the Vote for that. They're trying to figure out something to do in this crisis moment that we're in. I just didn't particularly think that it was that smart. I was actually surprised at how visceral on the other side the reaction to that was. Like, guys, I'm just telling you like what I know about parliamentary procedure. Here's why all of the people that are doing the work around this, here's why the people who are in Congress don't think that this particular tactic is a good idea.
And I would like to just jump in for a second, because this is one thing that I hear that a lot. It's like, why have the vote if the vote's going to fail? But that's like saying that's like saying why should you fight if you're just going to lose? And it's like the whole point of fighting isn't necessarily if you're going to win or lose. It's to, and here's the bigger picture here, is a lot of Americans don't know that just like the Republican Party has been corrupted by corporate money, the Democratic Party is also corrupted by corporate money. And the reason that we don't have Medicare for all is because both parties are owned by the giant insurance companies, right? It's the same reason we don't have a Green New Deal, because both parties are owned by big oil, and it's the same reason that endless wars continue, because both parties are owned by the military-industrial complex. So for me, Force the Vote was a tool. And having this, having the Democratic Party that claims it's the party of healthcare during a pandemic, put them on the record. You can't heal what you don't reveal. Get these Democrats on the record that go and spout these platitudes on CNN and MSNBC, and and say they're for universal healthcare, and actually put some pressure on them and see what happens. Because I'll tell you what, the Democrats who vote against Medicare for all during a pandemic, that's going to open up to a broader audience. And a lot of people who just kind of get their news on corporate media and aren't aware of just how corrupt most of the Democratic Party is, or I would say all of the Democratic Party is corrupt, in my opinion. And so that, for me, is what Force the Vote was about. And the final thing I'll say is, what's the point of having power if you're not going to use your power? Like, what was the point? We just found out from Cory Bush I think it was last week or